Not so long ago, she was making puppets from trees in the yard of her dirt floor home in Indonesia. Now her creations are the symbol of success for, of all unlikely collaborators, Disney on Broadway. Welcome to Women in Theater. I'm Linda Weiner, theater critic and arts columnist of Newsday. And our guest is Julie Taymor, the visionary director and designer who turned The Lion King from a blockbuster cartoon to an astonishing marriage of big-time commerce and international art. Does The Lion King seem like ancient history to you now? It was first opened on Broadway in '97.
I think, yeah.
But but for the rest of us, we see the big lion head out there all the time. So,
no, it doesn't, because we every year it seems like we have one or two more companies opening. I think we have 9 or 10 right now around the world, and I'm opening a new one October 16th in Australia, in Sydney. And I went out there. I have a great team, but I went out about a month ago to do the first week of rehearsals. And then I'll come back, and a few days before we open, I'll give notes. And that sounds pretty horrifying, that the director would come in, let everybody do all the other work, come in. But in a way, my team has done it so well. And yet, when I come in as the director, the actors are ready to hear the voice of the person who was the original. So it works. I did that in Chicago a couple of months ago. I was shocked. I felt a little intrusive, like, how can I do that? Aren't I stepping into another director, my associate director's bailiwick? But he said, no, they want to hear what you have to say. And 90% of the notes, one day of notes, really were effective. So I'm very connected. I love it. I love the show. I love my team. I love the fact that people all over the world can respond to this show.
That's what I was going to ask.
It's amazing.
Are there different responses?
Well, I don't know. I saw it in Japan, and that's very different. That was an all Japanese. There's 2 companies in Japan for the last 6 years. Wow. But in Australia, the company in Australia is the most international company. It's 16 nationalities. Maoris, Malaysians, Brazilians, Trinidadians, probably no Europeans, but Australians. And it gives this incredible world, global feel to a story that anybody can understand. And even though we always try and really try hard, and in every country but Japan, I think we have many South Africans, at least 6 or 7 or 8 South Africans, because the sound of that singing has to be the base of the sound of the musical. It's just something that transcends culture. It is about family, it is about tales, it's about animal allegory. It just really does speak across. It's not particularly American, it's something else.
In some ways, I would think that in Europe and in Asia, this would be less foreign than it is in America. That one of the many delightful things about The Lion King was the way that you have brought in non-linear, non-traditional art forms, and just assumed that the Americans would get it. Which I go to more theater a week than you want to know, and this whole idea of dysfunctional family plays and individual pathologies, and then you walk into something like this, and it's mythic, and it's stylized, and you don't talk down to the children, and you just bring everyone in to this, and I realize you believe in what you were doing, but still, did it surprise you?
I don't know if it surprised me. I guess the success of it is surprising, but it's not like that happened all of a sudden. It builds and it builds and it grows, and then you realize you have something that really can play anywhere, and equally. It's not that it plays better in one place or another. In Germany, it's in German. I find that weird. The one thing that I find strange is not strange, this is what you'd expect. Humor does not translate equally across culture. So Borscht Belt humor, inner city black humor is very hard to translate just language-wise to German or to Japanese. So we've had to find ways to adapt those, because in each place, it's in the well, we've only had 2 now in foreign languages to English. We're going to Holland next fall, so it'll be in Dutch. That'll be the next one. But that's a tricky one. You can get visual humor, but ethnic humor that is locally based is very tricky. But it was interesting in England. When we did it in England, I thought, well, should we have Timon and Pumbaa, who are these Jewish Borscht Belt, New York-style comedians, should we transfer that to Cockney or to Scottish? What should we play with the local equivalent? And it didn't work, because it's not written that way.
So you tried it, and
we tried it in rehearsal,
Uh-huh.
because the English actors are perfectly capable of doing the original style. They've all seen Guys and Dolls, and they've seen plenty of Scorsese movies, and they've seen plenty of that. I mean, that's the
And
thing.
Lion King, the cartoon.
Well, yes, the cartoon, but it's more that the inner city black sound that the hyenas are based upon, that kind of what Whoopi and Cheech did in the original movie, but even more so, it's so prevalent in our American movies that just go everywhere, that even in Australia, I was just stunned when I heard the Maori actress, woman, and a Malaysian come out and do the same kind of accent. Now, what I had to do there was I opened it up with them. I said, do you feel odd? Because I knew that they had auditioned, and I didn't do the auditions, being asked to do that. I'm not sure I can do a good imitation of it, but I think you know what I mean, like, well, Banzai, what have we got here? You know, it's a rhythmic thing. I find the rhythm and the music so wonderful that for me, it's not patronizing. It is its own sound. So I hold it up as a gorgeous sound and language that when I go, well, Banzai, what have we got here? I feel absolutely dull. Yeah. So there's so much character to mine. And I asked them, all right, now take that. This was to the Maori actors. Put it into your own, what would it be? And they started to describe what that ghetto speak or whatever would be there. And the rhythm was so slow. I can't do it because I don't know what it was, but they tried it and they said, no, it doesn't work. It loses a kind of fast-paced punch and a kind of wonderful dynamic boxing match that's going off. So when I said to the woman, because she felt uncomfortable imitating a black American sound for this character, I said, you're an actress. What's the problem? It's not like the whole Lion King, because we're talking now about the issue of how you present race on stage. The Lion King, first of all, it's all animals. But secondly, there's all kinds of black actors playing all kinds of roles, just as there are bad white characters and good white characters and comic white characters. So you have to just get over this PC thing in a moment and say, what is the character that you're getting?
And it worked all right?
Oh, yeah, and you as an actress are playing that character. And she needed to be alleviated from feeling, am I allowed? But it would be the same thing, well, you're a Maori, are you allowed to play Queen Elizabeth? Are you allowed to be in a Shakespeare play? Are you allowed to play things that are not something that you personally
would be a little
have
limiting
experienced?
for her.
Very limiting. And I think the beauty of theater is obviously that we want people to be able to cross into other realms as actors too.
Now, we, the theater community, really surprised when Disney, for its first big show in this amazing investment at the New Amsterdam Theater, chose you. And you know,
thanks.
Well, it's
No,
it's just that
I'm not surprised.
Your career has been in folkloric, mythic, much more avant-garde things, and
Shakespeare.
Yes, Shakespeare will do that.
Mm-hmm.
And how did it happen?
Well, Tom Schumacher, who is the head of Disney Theatrical, used to be the head of the Olympic Arts Festival. And when Elliot and I and
In
David
LA.
Seasdorf, in LA,
Yeah.
and we had put together a show called Liberties Taken, and we had presented it to him. And this is the American Revolution told with 15 actors playing 150 to 200 parts via the use of every kind of mask and puppet available. It's adult theater.
Yeah, you said something that I thought was really weird about that, which was fascinating, something about the underbelly of
Yes.
American folklore.
No,
Folk
underbelly
art.
of American history, not
History.
Folk, no,
Well,
we
okay.
used American folk art as the visual style, but it's the story of Liberties Taken is the story of the American Revolution. But there's no George Washington, there's no John Adams, there's no historic figures. It's the soldiers and the slaves and the Indians and the freed blacks and the I say it's the underbelly because it's told from the people, from that point of view, and it's based on a diary of Deborah Sampson Gannett, who was a woman who fought in the war disguised as a man. And Jonathan...
Don't we all?
Jonathan Corncob, who is a character from a novel that was written at the time called The Adventures of Jonathan Corncob, Loyal American Refugee. And that was a loyalist point of view. And it was a kind of Tom Jonesian scamp who screwed, made love,
so
whatever you say.
Tom Schumacher had seen this?
No, he knew about it. He'd seen videotape, and he saw my work, and Juan Darien was fairly well known by that time. Was it? No, I'm not actually sure. No, Juan Darien hadn't been done.
Well, the Olympic Arts Festival was 84.
Yeah, this was 84, and I think I did Juan Darien in 86.
88.
Well, first 86, and then 88,
and then 96.
90. Well, we did it 4 times.
Okay.
But I think that stuck in his head. He couldn't bring it out. He didn't bring it out, but he remembered it. And then Juan Darien happened, and then many other things, and I had the MacArthur. You know, I started to become known for my specialty as well as doing Shakespeare and some opera. And he approached me and said, would you be interested? And I hadn't seen the animated film at that time, which he thought was pretty astounding. But, you know, I did grow up on Disney films like most kids, and like them, especially the dark Pinocchio frightened the hell out of me. But aesthetically, it was not my cup of tea. The animations, some of them I think are beautifully done, including The Lion King, but the actual look of it is not my style. So we'd been, both Lion King and myself, I mean not Lion King, Disney and myself, we mine the same areas, which is myths, folk tales, folklore, animal stories, coming of age. The outsider is a character that I'm constantly dealing with, whether it's Grendel, Juan Darien, Hop Frog, and Fool's Fire. So it wasn't material that was foreign to me, it was whether they would give me the freedom to do it my way. And that's what they said. Tom and Peter Schneider, said, well, we're hiring you because we want what you do. We don't want you to do what we do. That's the whole point. So from the beginning, there was a very clear understanding that I was to bring my aesthetic, that I would have freedom to change the look of things, the character, the whole. I changed the logo. The logo of The Lion King is a woodblock, almost Japanese. It's very different than the airbrushed look of the poster for the Lion King movie. And they were very, very supportive.
I mean, wasn't that daunting?
Daunting?
Just to realize, I mean, it's hard really now to think back for me because of Lion King and because of the beautiful job that they also did, that Disney also did, renovating and reclaiming the beautiful theater. I have a very different feeling about Disney, but when Disney was opening there was this whole, Broadway's going to be a theme park.
Yeah. Beauty
and the Beast was a, you know, tracing paper kid show, and so I think I'm not alone in thinking, you know, that at that time that Disney had a lot riding on them turning the theater community and the theater press too, not to be too grandiose, but I think that they were really not, they were the devil. You know, or they were one of the corporate devils that were moving in. And for them to have just handed this entire thing over to you is still astonishing to me and quite wonderful.
Yeah, and I don't think it always happens. Or it has happened again in quite the same way. But whenever people use the word Disney, I know that is the organization, but for me it's individuals. I work with Tom Schumacher, Peter Schneider, and had occasional meetings with Michael Eisner. That's Disney to me. Disney is the same as Jeffrey Horowitz, my beloved producer of Theater for New Audience, or if I worked with the Lincoln Center, Bernie Gersten and Andre Bitch. They're individuals. Yeah. If you can work with these individual producers and they support you, that's the good relationship. It's not a corporation I'm working with. I know that in the movies I've heard stories that it's different. I mean in the movies with Disney or whatever, but that's not my experience. And we had a good enough contract that if it didn't work for either one of us, either side, we were out. And I really had that built in, that if I wasn't enjoying it, if I wasn't feeling that I was doing what I felt I could do, I wasn't the spring chicken in the theater. I've been in the theater since I was 11 and had done a lot of plays, a lot of musical theater work. I'd spent 4 years in Indonesia creating my own company. So they weren't trying to take a neophyte, a new baby and mold that person. to their
But
own.
to trust this person,
They wanted
with
what I had to
such
bring.
a commercial venture.
What Tom would always say is, look, we're going to give you the support you've never had financially, which is true. So you can do it in this way or you can do it that way. But let me tell you that the Taymor vision, what he meant by that was a little shadow puppet, we all know the little mouse, with a little light behind it. If you want to do that, that's what we think, that's great, because we understand. Tom knew the power of theater from Indonesia and Japan and all the various places where I'd been traveled and been influenced. You know, these places that had the origins of the art of theater. He was very well versed, much more than most New York producers. So we could talk about not just the bunraku, but the awaji or the hachioji. You know, these are very rarefied, special forms of theater in Japan. He knew them because of his, I guess, his experience with the international festival.
And also Peter Schneider used to work, he got his start in Chicago with
they were all theater people.
With David Mamet.
Yes.
So these people were already not what we thought of as Disney anyway.
No, they had created the animated films, but that's probably because it was so hard to make a living. They moved from the theater to film, and now Tom, of course, is back in the theater and not in film because, thank God, that it's been successful and there seems to be a future for the kinds of musicals they want to do. So it was really, it was amazing that I had the support to take the chances, and even in the style, it wasn't like they immediately said, oh yes, this thing with the head on top of the face is going to work. There was tremendous doubt after the first workshop. And I said, fine, I'll do 3 different versions. We did, but this is, I said, if you're not sure about like the Scar mask of the Mufasa on the face, if you're not sure about that, I'll do a version where it's half masks, and I'll do a version where it's just like cats, makeup. And I did a 2-week workshop. I said, but you have to give time for the actors to really learn this. You don't learn this kind of art form in 3 days of rehearsal. Even 2 weeks is fast, but to do a limited amount. And we'll just compare them. But we have to do it on a stage, with lighting, and full costume and makeup, and you have to sit not in a rehearsal studio at 890 Broadway, 30 feet away in full daylight, but you have to sit in the theater and know that the distance is also what's going to help the focus. And it can't be everybody. You know, there was a huge crowd. I said, just the people who matter. And I knew which one that I felt was the best one, but I really didn't have any, I didn't care. I mean, whichever felt like it worked best. They're all legitimate, beautiful art forms, whether it's the commedia half mask style with the chin piece or the stylized Peking opera makeup, they would all work. But what happened at the end of that was they all did work. And Michael Eisner, I've told this story before, so it's slightly boring to me, but Michael Eisner said at the time, they all work, but the one you first created, your first concept, which I called later the double event of this, it's the most risky, but if it works, the payoff is bigger. Now that whole concept of taking a big risk, and if a risk works, the payoff is bigger, is something which more people would live by, because that's what I live by.
That's absolutely the message that came up from the opening.
Yeah, which is they took a risk.
And I just saw it again on Friday night, and it's very well maintained for a long-running show. I was really, everything is just, it is the way I saw it before. But how did this little suburban girl from Boston, I'm sorry, at one point there was a little suburban girl from Boston who ended up going to Sri Lanka for a year, and then you got this grant and went off to Indonesia and stayed for 5 years?
4 or 5 years.
4 years. 4 years?
Yeah.
Where did she come from?
Well, I was the youngest, and we'll make this short so you can go on to everything else, by 6 or 7 years. And my parents went through all of those 1960s hell with their children. I have a great brother and sister, but they went through that, and I was an observer. And my parents didn't quite pay attention as I said, well, I'm going off to Boston, to the city, to act. And I acted in Boston Children's Theater from age 11, every day after school and all day Saturday. So I started to do theater, and not only that, but going from the suburbs to Boston put me in touch with people from Dorchester, from Cambridge, from different classes and different races of people that you wouldn't, not that you didn't have that in Newton, but not quite as different as when we were in that theater company. And I think starting at a very early age, the travel bug hit me, the curiosity about other cultures. And I went on the experiment in international living to Ceylon. It was called Ceylon at the time, Sri Lanka. and I wanted to go to Peru or India. So I went to India and Sri Lanka when I was young, and I was always, I don't know where that comes from, but very curious about other cultures. And my parents were very supportive.
It's amazing.
I went to Paris. I graduated high school early and studied mime at École de Mime Jacques Lecoq in Paris at 16 years old for a year before I decided to go to college.
And then you created your own major at Oberlin?
Yes, folklore and mythology.
Folklore and mythology major. You knew you didn't want to be a theater major.
I had an attitude about that. I felt that that practicing theater was studying theater, and that to be a good theater artist, whatever you wanted to be, an actor, director, designer, you needed to study the academics. So for me, studying folklore, religion, classics, English, Shakespeare, not necessarily studying theater. I don't know, I didn't really like reading plays as such. And then at Oberlin, Herbert Blau was there. Yeah. These were the years where Bill Irwin and a number of other really interesting performers got together, and we had our own group that spent, I studied the academics, but I also spent 7 hours a day doing theater.
And the amazing thing is that so much of American theater, the non-linear theater from the 60s and 70s were rejected for much of the 80s and 90s. I think they actually
it went back to the playwright.
It went back to the playwright. And you hung on with this vision.
Not exactly. I mean, I wasn't making plays with a committee. Juan Darien is, Elliot and I are the authors, so
yes, okay.
it is
Elliot Goldenthal,
yeah,
your collaborator, he's a composer. You've been partners
20 years.
For 20 years.
Yeah.
Romantic partners. I don't know what to call these things
work
anymore.
And both.
I like,
both.
He is my boyfriend, right?
Yes.
I think it was a Mel Brooks thing. He wasn't my boyfriend. Anyway, so you've been working for all this time with him.
On lots of different things, films, and now even opera that we're doing in theater.
And he won the Oscar.
Yeah.
He won an Oscar for his score for Frida, which you directed. Now, how did you choose? I can see, in some ways, your choice of directing Titus Andronicus as Titus, fits in more with what I might assume is a Julie Taymor project, but then to do the life story of Frida Kahlo.
It wasn't my idea.
Oh, okay.
See, it wasn't my baby. Titus was my baby.
Okay.
And the film industry is so difficult that it takes so long to get your projects on that in the meantime, if a good script came along, I was ready to do it. And Frida Kahlo, Mexico, we created Juan Darien in Mexico. We worked there, we developed the idea. So I was very familiar with Mexico, with the painters, with the Day of the Dead, with the folklore, with Diego and Frida, very peripherally at first.
Diego Rivera
and Frida Kahlo, and the script was a moving script, especially much more so about this incredible love story. And then I met Salma, and Salma was a very impressive person. When I met her for a couple of hours, I thought, why haven't I seen what is sitting before me up on the screen? I'd worked with Anthony Hopkins and Jessica Lange and Titus. I worked with and Jesse Norman in Oedipus, and I've worked with the best. Yes. And Salma hadn't proven herself as an actress in American films, maybe in Mexican or Latin American films. So I was taken with the whole challenge of it and how to do both a subjective and an objective point of view on her life. So the paintings coming alive, which are highly theatrical and much more in my theater style, they're forced perspective sets, they're collage, they're very, very theatrical and handmade looking. Those were not in the script. Those I brought to the script. I thought, I don't want to see a person sitting at a canvas painting, that's so boring. So how does she see her life from her inner eye, and how do those things then become the paintings later? And because her paintings are autobiographical, it was much easier for me to do that than if it was another painter.
Let's talk a little bit about the operas, because you mentioned Oedipus Rex, the Stravinsky opera, which you directed in Japan with Jesse Norman and for Seijiao, right?
Yes.
Long before The Lion King.
And it was my first opera.
And it was. Well, you also did the Wagner. You did Flying Dutchman for the Los Angeles Opera. And is opera in some ways, because of the stylization of it, it's in some ways more welcoming? to a vision like yours, then,
well, it requires that. That's why I also love Shakespeare, because with opera, the language of opera is larger than life. Therefore, to minimize it by what we would call realism would to make it puny and small. So it allows for you to open up both the exterior and the interior landscape, and that. Opera is wonderful because it's all the art forms.
And you're doing an opera for the Metropolitan Opera.
Yes,
you're doing
next October.
You're doing Magic Flute.
Yes.
Is this the same one that you did in Florence?
My team, George Siepen, the set designer, and actually he and I are the only. I think we're the only team continuing, because Don Holder didn't light it originally. We are jumping off of that very small contained production, which was in a little beautiful theater, at the Maggio Musicale. And now we have to expand it, and also it's 10, 12 years later. So. And
you also have a brand new opera,
yes.
Grendel, which is it's Beowulf from the point of view of the monster.
Yes.
Which you and
Elliot
are going to do for the LA Opera, and then I believe coming to Lincoln Center.
Yes.
We never even mentioned that when you won your Tony Award for Lion King, you're the first woman director to ever win a Tony Award. How ridiculous is that?
I don't know. I mean, it's. But when I look at what the women directors who I admire in this country have done, they're actually doing more experimental work, and they're women who so far haven't really been interested in compromising that. And I hate to say that, because that's a put down of the male directors, but I feel like they're easier to just sort of move from this work to, the more journeyman, they'll go from this to that. Because some of these women, they just like, whether it's Anne Bogart or Joanne Akalaitis, they have an idea of the kind of theater they want to do, and it may not fit within the commercial arena. Then it's very, well, for having Disney ask me from the avant-garde theater to come into the commercial does take that. It takes the producers having the vision to take the chance on the director, and I mean, come on, it's the history of women completely, whether people are going to want to do that.
Right.
With lots of money hanging in the balance.
Wow. Well, it's really, Lion King has meant a lot to me, and it's meant a lot to Broadway, and I think it's meant a lot to the art form, really, to musicals, and I'm really glad that you've been here. Thank you so much, Julie Taymor, and thanks for being here. On behalf of the League of Professional Theater Women, I'm Linda Weiner, and this has been Women in Theater.